Man, bout Louis V, proud of Adam Eve, didn't want you knowing me, cause I struggle with abandonment, hard to ride for me, ain't nobody else can handle it, I was in the wrong, wick burning like candle lit, down bad, back inside the cell like, damn it man, what we had was broken, I know I ain't wanna damage.
Welcome back to the videos, everyone. The time has come to get the Maximum Motorsports front strut bar on the Mustang. I've had that bar for a while now, and it's been something I've just been not really putting off, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But today we're going to tackle it. I got a lot of other stuff that needs to happen, but this is the next step. I need to get it off the workbench, get it out of the garage, and get it on the car. I'm really interested to see how it changes and affects the handling of the car. The rear strut bar that I put on the car did wonders for the car, so I'm excited to see what this will do. Okay, the thing I love about the Maximum Motorsports one versus like all the other ones is all the other ones are either a 2-point or a 3-point where they link up at the shock towers and then they go back to a singular point back there, whereas this one attaches at 2 different points. It just seems a little bit more sturdy, but I also really appreciate anything from Maximum Motorsports. The build quality and the finish is always like really good. This thing is pretty heavy. I didn't weigh it, but it weighs quite a bit, but I know the handling advantages from it will be worth it. Also, quick update for you guys. The Orange Soda Racing website is up and active right now. You guys can go there. You guys can grab the team t-shirts. We have the traditional Orange Soda Racing stickers there. And then we also just got some in. We also just got these in for purchase. You guys can go grab them. By the time you guys are seeing this video, they should be available, or hopefully soon after they will be available. Haha, the plot thickens because I don't know if you can see there. You can see there. So there, right there, is the hole that that has to mount through. And there's 2. I don't know if those are brake lines. They must be because there's no clutch on this car. There's 2 brake lines on opposite sides of that hole. So I got to figure out how to get the bracket mounted betwixt those 2 hard lines. This is proving to be quite the struggle. Not really that it doesn't line up, but it's got very tight fitment on the end brackets here to the shock tower. And then mainly back in this corner back here, it's having a hard time getting up under the AC line there, and that AC line does not move. Like there's no getting it to come up, because if you look, it comes right down here into, I believe that's called an accumulator, but don't quote me. But whatever it is, that canister there is hard mounted, and it's has a hard line there, and so there's not really much move in it. This is certainly proving to be a lot more than I bargained for. If you look down there, the bracket that holds the mass air is kind of in the way of that, sitting flush against the shock tower. So it's almost like that bracket would have to get trimmed up, which I really don't want to do, but it probably is going to have to happen. And then that is like a tight fit is an understatement. I want to say they're probably 10 mil bolts, but we'll see. Probably more like 12. It might be 1/2 inch. For those of you who are saying, of course it's 1/2 inch, it's an American car. there's actually there's a number of bolts and hardware on this car that are actually like metric size, and I'm not the only person who has ever ran into that on an American vehicle. Let's try 3/8. Nope. 7/16. You think so? Voila. And usually what I'll end up doing on this car is I'll just take the top side of the airbox off with the mass and just unclip it instead of trying to peel it all apart. But next step is to try and get the bar on. I can give you guys a better view. So this tab is like not far enough like forward my way in order to get a bolt in to the bracket. It's got to go through that hole there on the bracket. So it feels like this top layer right there on the firewall is shifted a little bit. However, that needs to be opened up a lot in order to get the brace through. The quickest and easiest solution to this would be to just get a different size nut and bolt, but we're not about that here. So what we're gonna do, I have a step bit. It's not very large and I might need to get something larger, but it's the only one I have that has a quarter drive hex drive on it. So I'm going to drop it down where it needs to be. Alright, that's enough progress and I guess victory for tonight. The strut tower bar is in enough to where it like needs to be, but I think what I'm gonna do is just get one bolt. Let's see here, let's get a shot in here. I'm just gonna get one bolt in the top of each shock tower. I gotta go ahead and drill a hole. I'm gonna use a center punch. The shock tower bar doesn't really line up as well as I like kind of thought it would or was hoping it would, but these cars do have some like you know, I wouldn't say quality control issues, but not every car is like perfectly the same. Alright, well, never mind, I spoke too soon. I don't have a 5/16 drill bit. I will tomorrow, so this is it for tonight. Alright, another day, another dollar. We're back at it. I got the 5/16 drill bit, so without further ado, there's not much to say. Let's get it done. First things first, so this thing's like for the most part tightened down, so I'm gonna get it exactly where it needs to be. I'm using this thing, it's called a center punch, and basically what you do is you just put it in the center of where you're gonna be drilling, and you get it lined up. Make sure that the bar is exactly where it's gonna be. You basically put it in the center of where it's gonna go, and you strike it. You literally just push down, and what I do is I actually usually do it a couple times. And what it does is it makes an impression that allows you to start drilling, and it's got a little dent there now, so the bit won't like walk. I'm just starting out with a smaller pilot bit. Now it's just a matter of getting all the hardware on and getting everything tightened down, and then getting all the components back where they belong. Alright, bar is completely installed. We got all the hardware tightened down, which is a lot harder to install these 6 front bolts. It's like a lot harder than you'd think. Drilling them was kind of I broke a couple drill bits, and then getting the hardware installed is but it's worth it. Now I just got to install the intake plenum. There's a relay right there I got to rehook up, and then I got to rehook up the starter solenoid, and then I'm guessing it'll be like the cover that's supposed to go right there for all of that. Might just be time to retire that or cut it or something. I don't know. We'll figure something out. I'm just trying to fit up the intake, and unfortunately the intake does not fit with the bracket on. Not only does this part, upper part of the mass airflow bracket not work with the strut bar, but getting it in there is like next to impossible. So it's coming off for now, and then later on I'm going to see if I can modify it or adjust it to try and work. I don't necessarily know that it absolutely needs it, but I like to keep certain things on here and there where I feel like it keeps the car true to form. Alright, so everything, and I mean everything, is completely put back together now. I'm about to take it for a test drive and just make sure everything's working good, see how it feels. I'm genuinely curious. Couple things to note. One of the things I will say after installing it, in terms of like fitment is great. However, right here on the vacuum tree, I don't know if you can see it, but the shank right there that like comes out of that eye hole down there behind the wiring harness is really high, and you can see how the vacuum tree is kind of like pushed up. You can see this one's not even in all the way, and then you can see the line of dirt right there where this bracket used to be, and it's like cocked weird now. It's not gonna break or nothing, but it's kind of weird fitment. And then the other thing to note is it specifies in the instructions that you don't want to have the starter solenoid touching the strut bar. So you can see there, we're all good. This is tightened down. So now we're ready to roll. Let me shut the fan out here so y'all can hear me. So you guys saw the front strut bar getting put on. The car handles a lot better now as a result. I couldn't notice like a humongous difference, but it does handle a lot stiffer, and I know this is like the best thing for the car. The next thing is, I noticed when I was working on the strut bar, the front wheel bearings are a little on the loose side, and I'm going to show you guys how to like check the preload on them and adjust them. I obviously still have the stock hubs. I don't have like SN95 hubs. If you have like SN95 knuckles and hubs, those are like set, and they're not gonna, you can't change them. This is for the factory setup. And then we also got to rebuild the negative ground cable after that. I'm going to show you guys how we're going to do that. Okay, so notice I didn't take the wheel off. All we did was take the dust cap off. There's quite a bit of grease on there, so we're gonna have to clean that up. And the preload actually is not bad. There's like a little bit of wiggle, but it's not anything that's not good, but I would like to adjust it a little bit tighter. Clean that off. And then first thing you do is take the cotter pin out. It looks like we actually broke part of the cotter pin because it was old. That happens though. Okay, then you can go ahead and take the lock ring off. And that exposes you to the nut that holds all the bearings in and holds the hub on. You're not going to take that off. You're actually going to take a pair of pliers and start adjusting it. So what you do is you adjust a pair of channel locks to the size of the nut, and then what everyone says to do is to tighten it down until it's tight and then back it off a quarter turn. I don't like that method because then the wheel bearing ends up being too loose. What I do is I'll usually spin the wheel and therefore the wheel bearing to kind of settle it, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. I'll tighten it basically all the way, get it tight to where there's no play at all. And then you spin it and check it, and there's still no play. And then what I do is I'll back it off increments at a time until I get the play that I desire. So it's still no play, so I want to back it off just a little bit more. So it could go, it's a little loose now, so it could go a touch tighter. So that's about perfect right there. It's got a little bit of play, but it's not, like, you want just a little bit there. I can rock the wheel and I can feel it, but it's not like over tight. And it can roll just fine. It has no resistance or nothing. That's how you set your preload. It is finally time to start taking the battery out and addressing this crusty old negative battery cable. This motor might be pretty clean for the most part, but this was my hand after just pulling the ground wire off. Like, there was one nut, half-inch nut that holds, or bolt, sorry, that holds the ground wire to the block. This is what my hand looks like after that. Just kind of concerning. Like, that's pretty bad. Okay, so we got the old ground wire off. The main thing that we want to do and fix is this. You can see how cracked and just how busted the old ground clamp is. So we got a new one, and then we got some new, I believe this is 2-gauge wire. Yeah, 2-gauge. We got some new black wire. We got some lugs. We're gonna solder the wire on into here to get the best connection, and then throw some heat shrink on there. You can just buy like new cables of these, but we're like big supporters of DIY and customizing and building stuff yourself here, so that's what we're gonna do. And then this pigtail is an additional ground wire that's hooked up to there, and this has a very specific connection here and there. So we're just gonna cut it right there, strip it back, and it's just gonna go in the clamp along with the main ground wire. And then this just runs down and bolts to the side of the engine block. So it's pretty simple. The only things that you're gonna need for this next section I went ahead and threw the lug in the vise, but you're going to need one of these copper lugs, obviously, and then a propane torch, your wire, some kind of a knife, your solder, and then some like soldering paste or whatever, flux, whatever they call it. That's going to help the solder actually absorb into the wire and get where it's supposed to go. You can also use like a soldering iron, but it's going to be a lot harder for doing this level of a like size of wire using something this big. It's going to be a lot harder. Okay, so I'm just going to take my wire, and you're going to kind of do a general gauge of how far the wire is going to sit in the connector, in the crimp connector. And you're going to cut back, and you can always cut more off, and you can also actually, if you cut too much off, you can also cut the wire shorter, but it's a lot trickier, and we don't want this wire to be any shorter than it is. So I'm going to start with that there, and we just do a quick test fit, and it fits good. However, we want like a little bit of room to work with the solder, and we want to make sure that the wires are in as far as they can go. So I'm going to take off another like 1/8 of an inch on the insulation. You want to be careful that you don't go too crazy and cut strands underneath, because they are like smaller wires, and you don't want to lose wires, because that's just going to decrease your effective wire size and create more resistance in the wire. Test fit that. We're getting close. It's still a really good fit, but I want a little bit of a gap. We're going to take a little bit more off again. Alright, so this is exactly what we're going for. You can see when I push it in, it's very close. The insulation is very close to the connector or the lug, but we want a little bit of a gap. You don't want too much of a gap, because then when you put your heat shrink on, it's going to like create an indent and look weird. This could probably be a tiny bit tighter, but this is what we're going to rock with. So I'm going to string my solder out a little bit and open up my paste. I'm going to open up my torch. I'm going to turn it down. You don't want a lot of heat. I'm going to go ahead and start by heating up the lug. Just warming it up. Now I'm going to take my wire . And you don't need to go crazy, just enough to cover the wire. And then I'm going to take this, set it down in the lug. And get it warm. so much solder. I'm holding the torch nice and low to try and keep it away from the insulation. Eventually you'll get to a point where it'll just like disappear as you send it into the wire. It'll go nice and smooth instead of breaking up. And it's not like you need to make sure that you like work your way around the lug with the solder, because the solder is very pliable and it will kind of like figure out where it needs to go, and it'll kind of like work its way around. So I'm gonna be basically filling the lug all the way up, so that way the whole thing is full of solder. And the reason we're doing this over just crimping the lug is not only does it make a tighter and more solid connection, but it kind of makes the connection a lot more immune to like corrosion, because you're essentially making like an electrical type weld instead of just creating a crimp, which is a lot better and more advanced. It's just going to hold the wire in place better and be a lot more corrosion and waterproof. This is basically the final result, and as you can see there, it could probably use a little bit more, but you can see the solder buildup in there, and I could tell that I was at my limit of how much solder it could use, because as you can see right there, it like started to like kind of spill out, and so I could try like packing more in, but it's good, it's at its limit. So I need to get some heat shrink to throw on this, but otherwise that's all there really is to it. Alright, so we're back with the heat shrink that we need. We just had to get the assortment kit because they didn't have the exact size I was looking for. For those of you who don't know what heat shrink is, it's just this like rubbery vinyl sleeve that you can put over wire or really anything, but when you apply heat to it, it shrinks up so it kind of like molds to whatever you're doing. You can use, in order to shrink up heat shrink, you can use anything from a lighter to what I'm using right now, to a heat gun, to even a hair dryer. I don't know how much success you would have with a hair dryer, but this or like a heat gun or a lighter would be your best bet. You just gotta be careful that you don't get too close to it with the flame, because it will burn. Like you'll just start on fire if you get too close and get it too hot. So the connection is good and strong. And after you're done, this is what we're left with. So it's nice and clean. The lug does have a little bit of slag on it, but that's okay. I can brush it off and it's not going to be seen or nothing. So we're going to strip the other side. We got to strip the other side now, and then we can throw it back on the car. So then I'm going to gauge. Take these screws up, and I'm going to gauge how much insulation I need to take back. It's an 11 mil. We got our supplemental ground wire that's going to go on, and I'm just going to stack them together and make sure that they're on top of each other in relation to the clamp. Back this one off, Joe. I decided to just throw some heat shrink on there just to make it look that much cleaner. Alright, so now I just gotta take this bolt out again and grab And throw the new lug back on there. There's like another bracket that's held on by the bolt, but this is where the main part where it's grounded out. So we got the new lug on. You can see there's the new wire. I'm gonna have to pull the slack up, but come around and get hooked up. So basically that wraps up everything for this week. That's all I have for the car. Soon here though, we're going to be taking off the bumper because we got to fix some issues with it sagging, and we're also going to be building a bash bar for the car because one of the things I've noticed in looking at drift cars and looking at the drift scene is if you drift a fox body, there is no option for you for a front bash bar. So that's something I want to address here soon. That'll come in probably the next video, but I'll catch you guys later.